Joining me now, special report anchor Bret Baier. As we await the press conference 1 hour from now, he'll be anchoring the special coverage. Bret, we've been watching you all morning. Let's go back to the historic significance of this. Maduro has been in power since 2013. He was a bus driver who was handpicked by then President Hugo Chavez to be his successor. And in that time, you've had a quarter of Venezuela's population forced to leave. You have starvation, oppression, death, drugs, and now, for the first time in decades, a real chance here for Venezuela to turn the corner. What can you tell us about this historic moment right now, Bret?
Yeah, Brian, good morning. It is historic, and for the people of Venezuela, it's a long time coming. They've really struggled under this brutal dictator for a long time, and I think there's no love lost that this action has been taken. It's really interesting historically that it's on the 37th anniversary of Manuel Noriega turning himself in. He was holed up in the Vatican embassy inside Panama after U.S. action to go into Panama and take him out. Almost exactly like this. He was facing an indictment on conspiracy and drug charges. He eventually was extradited, came to Miami, and faced a trial in which he was sentenced to 40 years. That is what Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, and the U.S., the Southern District of New York, plans to do on a prosecution there for Maduro and his wife in a legal action. Interestingly, it's also the anniversary of the 6-year anniversary of when the Trump administration, President Trump, took out Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general who led the Revolutionary Guard. That action changed the face of the Middle East as far as Iran's influence and what they were doing. I don't think it was purposeful, but it is interesting just to note those dates. And I think that this action has the potential to change the face of Latin America. And we will see, getting from point A to point B, about how the regime moves on to the next government, whether it's the opposition forces under Maria Machado or someone else. That's the big question come 11 o'clock at this news conference.
Now, this all happens about a month after the Trump administration announces a new foreign policy, essentially a directive here, national security strategy, that we're not going to allow Iran, Russia, and bad actors to have any say in the Western Hemisphere. Now you've got a situation here where Venezuela was essentially a gas station for these Axis powers. And now there are real questions here about the impact this could have on Iran, that is now seeing protests and disruptions in 70 of their cities that we have not seen since 2022. So my question to you is, do you think that this is a real warning to Iran? And do we expect the president perhaps to address that less than an hour from now?
I think so. And in the interview with Fox and Friends weekend, he definitely hinted at that. It has ripple effects all over the world. First of all, Iran is very active inside Venezuela. Hezbollah clearly is trafficked right into the middle of a lot of what we're seeing there on the ground. It has long been a source of concern for intelligence officials about Hezbollah's activity inside Venezuela. Russia, obviously, with its oil trade, China with its influence in Latin America, all of that has ripple effects that potentially this affects. But Iran specifically, after dealing with protests on the ground in Tehran, very vigorous protests, where the president put out a Truth Social saying that the U.S. is locked and loaded should Iran start killing in earnest these protesters. I think that those words are kind of backed up by what he's been saying in recent weeks since the attack on the Iran nuclear facility. This is not popular inside MAGA world. It's not popular to be this forward-leaning to possibly the threat, as it's talked about of having ground forces someplace in a long-time war. But that's not what the president's policy is. He's saying these surgical strikes, these forceful actions, and then letting these countries figure out how to be players that the U.S. can work with. That seems like it's the Trump doctrine, and we're seeing it play out.
Bret, I got to say, one of the main questions I'm going to have at this press conference is about this transition. Did the administration have a conversation with opposition leadership in Venezuela before this attack and this capture? Is there a plan in place to perhaps provide some sort of reinforcement for the opposition leader, Maria Machado, and to ensure that this isn't just left up to even a remote possibility that this government lands back in the hands of those who are sympathetic to Maduro and to Chavez?
It's a great question, Brian, and I think it's the primary question at this news conference, is next steps and for the government in Venezuela. How much did the U.S. know going in? Was there this pre-condition set up with some of the people inside the regime and some of the opposition forces? The president's confidence in that interview with Fox and Friends seemed to suggest that they had some pre-knowledge. Didn't get into it in detail, but he believes that a lot of the regime elements that were saying that they were loyal to Maduro are not loyal to him now. He said that it doesn't appear like they're going to be a big problem. I don't know. Maybe they can show some cards about how they know that, how he knows that. And I think that there are a lot of questions about next steps. But you talk about the implication of this action. Right now, you're going to have a trial eventually for Maduro where the world will see these specific indictments that actually were dropped in 2020 and very detailed about all the things that he's accused of doing.
You know, I covered the El Chapo trial here in New York City. It's the first thing I thought about. I know that there's a lot of comparison to Manny Noriega, the Panamanian dictator, and rightly so, but it'll be very fascinating to cover that here in Manhattan. Bret Baier, thank you so much. We'll see you in about an hour for coverage of that presidential news conference. Bret, thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Yep.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.